I just want to say thank you to the state's attorney, to Detective Tiros. You did a great job. I truly appreciate it. To the Attorney General, it's been 3 months of pain and agony. I just want to say thank you, Lord. Thank you. Justice, please. I just want justice. I don't want to fight with nobody. I don't want to hurt with nobody. I just want justice for my daughter. And I want peace in my family. This has been such a hard 3 months. It's been painful. It's been terror. We've been torn apart. One of the leaders of our family, she was the baby, but she was the leader.
We are getting new details in the shooting death of a young mother in Chicago. Prosecutors say the woman accused of killing her did not know her before that encounter.
We're also learning the accused had filed an order of protection months earlier that was never served. Tia Ewing is here with the other key points we've learned from court today.
Someone Blackman standing with her arms crossed. They say he then slammed a car door on Blackman and also put her in a chokehold. Prosecutors say Johnson broke free, and that is when, or I should say Blackman broke free, and that is when Blackman was shot once, and then that's when they say Johnson paused, then fired 2 more times. Police recovered 3 9mm casings there at that scene. Johnson legally owned the gun and claimed self-defense. Prosecutors say Blackman was unarmed. Her son turned 7 days after the shooting.
The morning followed a pattern repeated thousands of times across the city. A car stopped, a child exited, a school door opened. Within minutes, the routine ended. What happened next unfolded in public view, yet much of it remains obscured by conflicting accounts, delayed decisions, and unanswered questions. At a busy intersection surrounded by cameras and commuters, a brief interaction turned irreversible. Early reports offered fragments. Later updates contradicted them. A name surfaced, then disappeared, then returned with charges attached. Between those moments exists a gap, one filled with silence, procedural delay, and details that surfaced only after sustained pressure. This case is not defined solely by what occurred, but by how long it took for clarity to arrive, and what still remains withheld. To understand what happened that morning, it is necessary to start far earlier and follow the trail to its unresolved end. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The morning began like countless others in Chicago's South Loop. Shortly after sunrise, traffic moved steadily along State Street and nearby corridors as commuters headed downtown. Parents navigated school drop-off zones, delivery vehicles paused briefly at curbs, and pedestrians followed familiar routes toward offices, transit stops, and storefronts. The environment showed no visible indicators of disruption. School drop-off procedures were routine. Vehicles slowed near designated areas, children exited cars, and adults remained momentarily before re-entering traffic. Surveillance cameras positioned on nearby buildings recorded the area continuously, as they did every weekday. Witnesses later reported nothing unusual in the moments leading up to the incident. The intersection where events later unfolded was active but controlled. Traffic signals cycled normally. Pedestrian crossings were occupied intermittently. The presence of bystanders was consistent with the time and location. These final confirmed moments showed no deviation from expected patterns. What followed occurred within minutes and contrasted sharply with the normal pace of the morning. Romeka Meeks Blackman was 31 years old at the time of her death. She was a Chicago resident with established ties to her community. Available records indicate she grew up in Illinois and maintained close relationships with family members. Her educational background included completion of high school, with some reports indicating post-secondary coursework, though details remain limited in public records. She was employed at the time, working to support her household. Those who knew her described her as structured and consistent in her routines. She was the primary caregiver for her 6-year-old son, managing school schedules, transportation, and daily planning. Her relationship with her son was documented through her actions rather than public statements. She followed a consistent morning routine that included preparing his meals and transporting him to school. One detail that later drew public attention was a handwritten note she placed in his lunchbox on the morning of the incident. The note was later shared publicly and became a reference point in discussions about the case, though it did not factor into investigative findings. Meeks Blackman maintained an active but typical social media presence. Her posts primarily reflected family life, routine activities, and personal reflections. There was no public evidence of ongoing disputes, threats, or conflicts prior to the incident. Friends, family members, and co-workers did not report known enemies or escalating issues involving her. Investigators later examined the week preceding the shooting to identify potential warning signs or deviations from normal behavior. According to law enforcement statements, Meeks Blackman's activities followed expected patterns. She attended to work obligations, managed childcare responsibilities, and maintained regular communication with family members. Phone records and message logs reviewed by investigators showed no unusual volume or tone. Social media activity did not indicate distress, conflict, or anticipation of confrontation. There were no reported incidents involving law enforcement or disputes in the days prior. Authorities also examined whether Meeks Blackman had prior interactions with individuals later connected to the case. At the time charges were filed, police stated there was no confirmed prior relationship between the victim and the accused. No warning signs were publicly identified during this review period. On the morning of the shooting, Meeks Blackman followed her established routine. She woke early, prepared her son for school, and drove him to his school in the South Loop. Drop-off occurred without incident. Surveillance footage confirmed the timing and location of her arrival and departure. After her son entered the school building, Meeks Blackman remained briefly near the area. The exact reason for her remaining at the location was not specified in public records. Shortly afterward, she encountered another woman near the intersection of State Street and Cermak Road. The area included multiple residential and commercial buildings equipped with surveillance cameras. Foot traffic was moderate. Witness visibility varied depending on positioning, with some individuals closer to the curb and others across the street. According to police reconstruction, a verbal exchange occurred between the two women. The content of the exchange was not fully disclosed. Investigators stated that the interaction escalated rapidly. Physical positioning placed both women on the sidewalk near parked vehicles, within view of traffic and pedestrians. The escalation culminated in the discharge of a firearm. Investigators reported that a handgun was used. Details regarding ownership and acquisition of the weapon were not immediately released. One shot was fired, striking Meeks Blackman in the face. Witnesses reported that the suspect acted immediately after the shooting, leaving the immediate area. The victim collapsed at the scene. Bystanders contacted emergency services within moments. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics initiated on-site medical procedures before transporting Meeks Blackman to Stroger Hospital. Despite medical intervention, she was later pronounced dead. The weapon was not immediately recovered at the scene, contributing to early uncertainty in the investigation. Police secured the area and established a perimeter. Traffic was diverted while investigators processed the scene. Witnesses present at the time were detained briefly for questioning. Statements varied in detail and sequence, reflecting differences in vantage point and timing. Early media reports contained conflicting information regarding the nature of the confrontation and the status of the suspect. A person of interest was initially taken into custody but later released without charges. This decision was not accompanied by a detailed public explanation, leading to confusion and speculation. Public attention intensified as information gaps became apparent. Law enforcement emphasized that the investigation was ongoing and that evidence was still being analyzed. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage from multiple sources, including traffic cameras and private building systems. Video analysis focused on movements before, during, and after the shooting. Forensic teams collected ballistic evidence and processed the scene for physical traces. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy, confirming cause of death as a gunshot wound. Additional findings were not fully released to the public. Authorities analyzed phone records, vehicle registrations, and location data to track the suspect's movements. This process required coordination across agencies and contributed to delays in charging decisions. Police later stated that additional evidence emerged over time, clarifying the sequence of events and supporting probable cause. Internal challenges, including evidence review timelines and legal thresholds for charging, influenced the pace of the case. Months after the shooting, formal charges were filed, marking a transition from investigation to prosecution. After months of investigation, law enforcement formally identified Quadaja Johnson, a 31-year-old woman from Des Plaines, Illinois, as the primary suspect in the shooting death of Rebecca Meeks Blackman. The identification followed a prolonged evidence review that included surveillance footage, witness statements, and digital data analysis. Public records indicated that Johnson had no documented prior relationship with Meeks Blackman. Investigators stated there was no familial, professional, or social connection between the two women. This absence of a known relationship became a focal point in understanding the case, as it suggested the confrontation was not rooted in a long-standing dispute. Johnson was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors alleged that the shooting was intentional and unjustified, meeting the statutory requirements for the charge. The decision to pursue first-degree murder reflected the prosecution's assessment of the evidence, including the nature of the confrontation and the use of a firearm in a public space. At her initial court appearance, Johnson was ordered held without bond. The judge cited the severity of the charge, the circumstances of the offense, and public safety considerations. Court proceedings moved forward under heightened scrutiny due to the delay between the incident and the arrest. Following the filing of charges, public attention intensified. Vigils were held near the site of the shooting and in other parts of the city. Demonstrations focused on accountability and transparency in the investigative process. These events were organized primarily by community members and advocacy groups concerned with violence near schools. Family members of Meeks Blackman issued statements calling for justice and clarity. Their comments emphasized the need for a thorough legal process and consistent communication from authorities. These statements were disseminated through press conferences and interviews, but did not introduce new factual information into the case record. Online platforms became venues for speculation. Users debated motives, timelines, and investigative decisions. Law enforcement repeatedly cautioned against unverified claims, noting discrepancies between speculation and confirmed facts. Media coverage evolved over time. Early reports emphasized the shock of the incident and the lack of immediate arrests. Later coverage shifted toward procedural analysis, focusing on why charges took months to materialize and what evidence led to the arrest. This shift reflected the changing availability of confirmed information. As the case entered the court system, both the prosecution and defense began pre-trial preparations. Prosecutors filed motions outlining their intent to introduce surveillance footage, forensic findings, and witness testimony. They argued that the evidence established a clear sequence of events leading to the shooting. The defense focused on procedural issues and evidentiary standards. Motions challenged aspects of evidence collection and the interpretation of witness statements. Defense attorneys also signaled an intent to examine whether the confrontation constituted a spontaneous incident rather than a premeditated act. Key evidence expected to be presented includes video footage capturing portions of the encounter, ballistic analysis linking the weapon to the shooting, and digital data tracing the suspect's movements. Prosecutors also indicated reliance on eyewitness testimony, though they acknowledged variations among accounts. Witness credibility emerged as a central issue. Differences in perspective, timing, and environmental conditions affected recollections. The court was expected to evaluate these inconsistencies alongside physical evidence. Potential legal outcomes ranged from conviction on the charged offense to lesser-included offenses, or acquittal, depending on how evidence and testimony were interpreted during trial. Despite formal charges, several questions remained unresolved. Investigators did not publicly disclose a definitive motive. The lack of a prior relationship between the victim and the accused complicated explanations for why the confrontation escalated so quickly. Another unresolved issue concerned preventability. Analysts questioned whether earlier intervention or situational awareness could have altered the outcome. However, no evidence indicated that either party anticipated the escalation. Institutional factors were also examined. The delay in filing charges prompted scrutiny of investigative procedures, evidence processing timelines, and communication strategies. Law enforcement acknowledged challenges but maintained that the delay was necessary to meet legal standards for prosecution. The case contributed to broader discussions about gun violence near schools. The location of the incident raised concerns about safety in spaces typically associated with routine family activities. Urban safety considerations extended beyond this single case. Analysts noted patterns involving confrontations in public areas and the presence of firearms. These discussions intersected with policy debates on gun access, law enforcement response, and community safety measures. Prosecutorial discretion became another focal point. The decision-making process surrounding when and how charges are filed influenced public trust. Comparisons were drawn to similar cases where delays affected public perception. Patterns observed in this case aligned with broader trends in urban violence investigations, particularly those involving delayed arrests due to evidentiary thresholds. At present, the case remains in the pretrial phase. Johnson is in custody awaiting further court proceedings. Trial dates have not been finalized, and additional motions are pending. Certain evidence remains sealed, including portions of surveillance footage and detailed forensic reports. Prosecutors indicated that this material would be disclosed according to court rules as the case progresses. Legal analysts noted that the outcome would likely depend on how jurors interpret the convergence of digital, physical, and testimonial evidence. The location where the shooting occurred continues to function as it did before. School drop-offs resume daily. Traffic patterns remain unchanged. Pedestrians move through the area without visible markers of the incident. The case persists as a record of how quickly routine settings can become central to criminal proceedings. Its significance extends beyond the individuals involved, serving as a reference point for discussions on public safety, investigative process, and legal accountability. Until the court reaches a final determination, the full narrative remains incomplete, defined as much by unanswered questions as by documented facts.